Well, today we are going to show you a little bit more professional operation than what I've got going on at the house. We've talked about maple syrup, we've talked about gathering the sap, and today I've got a special treat. We are at Southdown Farm with Seth Long. He's the owner of Southdown Farm, and he's got a really neat operation here, and we're just going to kind of look at what he's got going on. Unfortunately, the sap run here in Kentucky is about to run out, so we're not going to get to see any sap being boiled off, but he's going to show us his operation and all that. Seth, how long you been making maple syrup here in Fletcher County?
I'd say it's been about 8 or 9 years that we've been making maple syrup. Now, we didn't always have what we got here, and we didn't know what we were doing when we started.
Like me.
Well, it's how a lot of people start, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know you could make maple syrup in Kentucky.
I had no idea either, to be honest with you, until
friends of ours started fooling around with it, and I was like, I wonder if we had maple trees on our place. And we took a hike and some survey ribbon and found some maple trees. And maple syrup comes from maple trees, so we were going to figure this out one way or another.
One way or another.
Yeah. So
how many trees do you have tapped right now on your farm?
This season we had 330 trees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I used to, when we started out, it started 2 or 3 trees. We got up to about 16 trees, and we were about maxed out because we had to carry all our sap out of the hills. And these hills are steep.
Yes,
you
they
know
are.
that they're steep, and
Yeah.
we were limited by how much we could carry out. And when we went to a school where they introduced us to tubing and some of the benefits to tubing, and that was in November of 2016, and by January we had purchased an evaporator, tubing, jugs, and we were optimistic. We were on the run, and we were starting to make maple syrup to sell.
That's cool. That's really cool. Now, about how many, you said you have 300 and some trees tapped, about how much on a good run, a good day when you have a good run, about how much sap do you get in an average day?
Yeah, we can, a couple times this year, we would go to bed after boiling, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, clean our tanks out, close up everything, sap would be running, and we wake up with a full 400 gallons of sap waiting for us.
Wow.
8 o'clock in the morning, ready to do it all over again.
That's
so
awesome.
we can get in a 24-hour period pretty easily 600 gallons on a really good run. That's not every run, but
Right.
on a really strong run, we can get 600 gallons.
That's awesome. I know in the little operation we have up there at the house, right now we have 14 trees tapped. We
Yep.
started off with 10, we added 4 more, and like on the days that you always go up there and you're like, it's kind of almost like hunting Easter eggs. You don't know what you're going to find until you open the buckets up. And some days the buckets are really full, and some days they don't have much. But
Yeah.
it's I can't imagine. If in a few minutes we'll show you his tubing that he has coming into his sugar shack here, but you ought to see all the sap running. We were here a couple of weeks ago for the Maple Day Festival he had here at the farm, and you could see the sap running through these tubes. It just looked like somebody had a water spigot on and the sap running down through the tube.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat.
And one of the amazing things, I'll never stop being amazed by that, is, that sap running down the lines, coming down to the sugar shack here, comes out of a tree, it doesn't pour. It doesn't flow out of the tree. It's drip,
Yep.
drip, drip. But you get 330 trees dripping, and you can have quite a flow. And the other thing that we'll need to talk about is the 3/16 inch tubing that we're using creates a natural vacuum. It's a sealed system, and I can pull 26 inches of vacuum on these lines when everything's flowing and running well. So that helps increase that flow.
Oh,
Helps.
Almost pulls it out of the tree.
It does.
a little bit,
It does. And what happens is, if you just have a bucket under, you're using gravity in a bucket type of thing, it'll shut off quicker than mine will, because that actually will help pull it longer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it'll extend it maybe sometimes 2 days longer than what just a gravity system will do.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's pretty cool.
Now, all of our equipment is just very basic. A lot of it I have built. But now I know you've got, and when we go in the sugar shack here, you've got some pretty professionals. You got a very professional looking boiler and everything. Who knew that there was places out there that actually made this stuff? And so where do you, like here in Kentucky, obviously it's probably hard to get. How far away do we have to travel to get stuff like that?
Yeah, so from here, our evaporator came out of Sunrise Evaporator, up in Topeka, Indiana, and it's about a 7-hour drive from here, which it's not too far, not too bad.
It's not bad.
But you start getting up up into PA, Michigan, of course Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. That's sugar country. There's
Right.
all kinds of supplies up that way, and a lot of them ship. So some of the evaporators you can purchase and they'll ship for free. So it doesn't matter where you are.
They'll get it to you.
They'll get it to you. They'll want to sell you an evaporator. So there's some great regional suppliers. There's a CDL dealer in West Virginia that we get a lot of suppliers from. He actually we met him up in Jenkins this year with a bunch of supplies for this season. So, there's not a lot of people doing it. One of the things that we don't have that we really miss living here is that institutional knowledge, of the neighbor down the road is doing it and say, how did you do this? I wonder, I'm running into this problem. How do you do it? We don't have a lot of that interaction right here. So, but we have online. So you can find anything you want on YouTube or online, that type of thing. So technology helps us come a long way. And in here in the Sugar Shack, we'll go in here in a minute. One of the things that I like to think about is there's a long history in Central Appalachia of making maple sugar. Long history. Native Americans did it before we came here. Settlers did it. When we first started selling our maple syrup at the market, old timers would come up to us. These guys were 80, 85 years older and say, "Did you make this here in Letcher County?" And I said, "Sure did." They said, "I remember when." And you can see them going all the way back till they're 8 years old.
Oh yeah.
Helping mom and dad, but they did it with crude elementary methods. I mean, they had a cast iron pot out in the yard over a fire, and I can't imagine how long it took to evaporate doing something like that. But what we got today, we got tubing, we got evaporators, we got a reverse osmosis machine here that helps us, condense the sap. We can apply technology today and make maple syrup commercial. And in the fields here, we're wondering, what do we do? What's next? How are our kids going to make a living? What can we do? And I don't think maple syrup is the silver bullet. I don't think there are any.
No, but it helps. I mean, it's one of the building blocks to getting this area.
It's a diverse economy.
Exactly.
So I rather than a silver bullet, I say it's a shotgun blast. You got pellets and they're silver BBs, and this is one of those BBs that I think can be used here in eastern Kentucky and in the region.
And one thing I've noticed, I'm heavily involved in bushcraft and self-reliance and all that. And one thing I've noticed is there's a turn back. Society is wanting to learn these old-time skills. They're wanting to learn how things was done back before there was any of the technology.
Yeah.
And this is just one of the many things that people like you, folks like yourself, are bringing back.
Yeah.
That was going to be long lost if somebody didn't bring it back.
It's almost like a distant memory that we're tapping in, pun intended, we're tapping into a distant memory that was almost lost. But we see it too. We raise produce here in the summertime, the spring, summer, to fall. And, think about through COVID, bare grocery shelves.
Yeah.
Our food systems, we picked up a box of spinach and it was cheaper than what we could sell for. And I got to look and I wonder how they can do that. A big 2-pound box of spinach.
Right.
It come out of Mexico.
Wow.
And it came out of Mexico and it was organic. Well, who in Mexico is policing the organic standards and marketing it? And it came how many thousands of miles up here? That's a broken food system.
That is.
That's too many things between there and here that can go wrong, and we can lose out. So I think people are really concerned about local foods. Been a lot of attention placed on local foods, and I think it's time, and I think it's necessary.
I agree. And just to be honest with you, there's nothing that tastes any better than stuff that you've grown yourself or that's been grown by your neighbor or whatever the case may be. So
exactly. You go to the grocery store, I'm thankful for grocery stores and everything, but the produce is pretty sorry in there. They've been sitting around a while, and
it has been, and it's wilty, and sometimes it's starting to turn brown, especially nowadays. Seems like you go in and a lot of the stuff is starting to turn brown. Real quick question for you before we move on.
Yeah.
About how many bottles of maple syrup do you make in an average season?
So this season we'll bottle about 40 gallons till it's all said and bottles per gallon. So do the math. I don't, but so and that's pretty good for us. This I think every year we can get a little bit more efficient and learn some techniques and stuff. This weather plays a big part into it. Of course, to make maple syrup, you need a freeze thaw cycle. I don't think we talked about that whole thing, but you know, you need those nights that are below freezing, those days that are up around 40, 45. That's a Kentucky winter.
Yes, it is.
You know,
exactly.
it's a series of freeze thaw cycles, and I'm friends on some groups on Facebook with sugar makers up north. They haven't even started tapping yet. They're amazed. Our season's finishing up, and they're 3 or 4 weeks out from even getting their first draw. So
I've actually got a friend in Maine who
Yeah.
does this as
Yeah.
a hobby, and that's what he said. He said their season wouldn't start till March.
Exactly.
And I was like, man, our season will be over in
Yeah.
March, you know. So.
So I like to temper a little bit. I'll show them the big flow and get all kinds of feedback on
Make them just a little bit jealous.
a little bit, yeah.
So Seth, we're looking at your boiler and everything, and one of the first things that comes to mind is being raised in Eastern Kentucky. One activity that I remember well was making sorghum molasses.
Yes, sir.
How does your boiler for maple syrup vary as opposed to making sorghum molasses?
So one of the big differences between the sorghum and maple sap, the guys doing sorghum start out with a juice that's about 22% sugar. I'm starting out with a juice that's 1 or 2% sugar. That's a big difference.
Yes.
Thousands of times difference in the amount of sugar content. So where they start with a higher sugar content, they don't have to boil it as hard as we do. Our main objective here is to get the water out of the sap, and the sugars will stay behind, and as they heat up, they'll caramelize, right? With sorghum, it's a lower heat and you stir it so it doesn't burn on the bottom. With an evaporator, typically you have 2 different parts of an evaporator. You have a flue pan and you have a syrup pan. The flue pan is not a flat bottom, but there's all these channels that are about 7 or 8 inches deep, and they just kind of go in an accordion underneath there, and that fire has access to all that. So what you get out of that is more square inches of heat against your liquid to boil quicker. If you just had a flat bottom, it'd just be so many square inches.
Yes.
But where you have all this material here and that heat going up through there and up out your stack, you get a hotter fire in here. We don't have to worry about scorching this unless we go dry, then we're hurting.
Right.
But as long as we got liquid in here, we want to boil the fire out of this to get the steam out of here so we're not out here all night long.
I've spent many a late evening boiling in our little setup, so this I'm sure is a lot faster than what we got. But even with that, I'm sure it's still a slow process, isn't it?
This is a small evaporator. It's not a big by any stretch. It's really a pretty small evaporator with a lot of the features that bigger evaporators have. It'll boil off, when I've got it dialed in right, about 25 gallons an hour of water.
Wow. Wow.
That's great, but if I have 400 gallons of sap out here, you know, that's a long day.
Yes, it is.
And we have pulled all-nighters out here boiling down, just trying to do this, taking 3-hour shifts and waking each other up and trying to keep this thing going so we can stay ahead of that sap. Because one of the things about the sap out here has a shelf life.
Yes.
Especially if the temperature goes up, it's not going to keep very long, so it's really important to turn that into maple syrup as quickly as we can.
That makes complete sense. Now, I realize this myself, but maybe the viewers don't. Is this wood-fired or propane-fired?
Oh, that's a great question. This is a wood-fired unit. This is, the ashes go down here in the big wood box, fire brick, insulation there. This is an airtight unit. But you can get a wood-fired, a gas-fired, oil-fired. Diesel, I mean, there's all different types of ways to fuel an evaporator. It's just that for us, we like the wood fired. I think it gives something to the flavor, that's just me. But we have acreage back here and trees fall down. We got a free fuel source back here.
Exactly. Now, you was talking about, you get 400 plus gallons of sap in a day. To boil that off, how much wood you go through?
That's a great question. Normally, you see these IVC totes here? I think this season to make 40 gallons, we went through 5 or 6 of these this year.
That's not as bad as I would have expected.
So it's not too bad, but I'll tell you one of the reasons it's not too bad, because we're just not boiling down to straight sap in here like we used to when we started out with 100 taps. We've added the reverse osmosis unit in, and that's...
What did you call this again, Seth?
This is a reverse osmosis unit. A lot of people would be familiar with reverse osmosis around filtering water filtration. Basically, your water will go through it and it'll filter out everything you don't want, particulate, minerals, whatever, and then leave you with pure water. In the maple syrup industry, these have been introduced, and this is designed for maple syrup. So our sap comes from our tank out here, and instead of going right into my evaporator here, it's plumbed into my reverse osmosis unit. When it runs through this at about 200 psi, it's got two 40-inch membranes here, and it'll take 75% of the water out. So think about that 400 gallons of sap, 75%. I'll end up with 300 gallons of water over here in my permate tanks, or that's my clean, purified water from the maple sap, and then I have 100 gallons of concentrated sugar sap to boil down. That saves me a ton of time out here in the sugar.
Oh, I can imagine.
I might have 1.5% sap, percent sugar in my sap when it comes to me, and I can put it over in the tank between 5 and 7%. So to give you an idea, if you go from 1% to 2%, you've increased the sugar by 100%.
Wow.
That's quite a bit.
That is.
And the time that this saves, now it's an investment too, because they're not free,
No.
but it's a part of what we're trying to do. How can we do more? We bought the evaporator, 25 gallons an hour. That worked great, but when you get up to 200, 250 trees, we're pulling all-nighters. So we put this in the mix, and that really helped us out with our time.
I can imagine anything you can do to speed it up.
Yeah.
I mean, I know myself and the little operation that we've been tinkering with there at the house, hours and hours just for 24 gallons of sap. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine, with
Yeah.
as much as you guys got coming in. That's crazy. So
Yeah, so you got this, and it's always the growth, the equipment that you invest in when you grow. Probably one of the next things that we look at as we put out more taps is an evaporator that'll produce, or maybe do 50 or 60 gallons an hour,
Right.
more productive than what this one is.
well, I couldn't imagine, even with a 25 gallon per hour, I could have every bit of the sap that I collect in
Yeah.
a week's time done in an hour.
No, and if you have 100 taps or 150, this is great. Or if you have time, even more. But it's more the time, it's energy too. The fuel to put into it, somebody's got to cut it.
Yeah.
And that takes time too. So the more efficient we are, the less energy, the less time, the more productive we can be.
Exactly. Okay, Seth, you was talking about the pressure gauges and the vacuum gauges. I guess this is one of the vacuum gauges. You care to tell us a little bit about what's going on here?
Yeah, so on the end of each one of my runs, I have these vacuum gauges. One, because it's pretty cool to see it pulling vacuum like that. And I've seen it all the way above about the 26, 27 inches of vacuum. That's a lot of vacuum
That
on
is a
line.
lot of vacuum.
It's pretty amazing. It'll pull that much vacuum. But the other thing this will do for me, it's right along the road here. When I drive up through here, I can visually check my vacuum gauges to see if there's a hole in it. So, a tree could have fallen, A squirrel could have got into it, chewed a hole. Any kind of little hole will release your vacuum. And then I know which lines we need to walk and to make a repair on. Because that vacuum is important to me because it'll keep my flow running for days as opposed to just a gravity system where it'll shut off quicker once it warms up. With the vacuum, it keeps that flow coming for 2 or 3 days at a time.
Now, one thing I guess I want to stress on this is a natural vacuum. You do not have a pump pulling that.
No. And commercial producers will put mechanical vacuum on their lines because this is a technique to get sap out of trees using vacuum. But we're using our steep Kentucky hillside property here. If you have 40 feet of fall in your line, 40 feet of fall in that line, you will produce 26 inches of natural vacuum. From here on down, we might have 200 feet of drop right here. So we in eastern Kentucky, you know, that terrain often works against us, but we can make it work for us.
Works for us in this situation, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if the folks watching the video can see this or not, but the tubing going down the hill looks very similar to a spider web down through there. You can see all the interlacing, interwinding tubings. He's went to a lot of work and a lot of hard days, I'm sure, running all this.
People ask me, you know, how long do you have to take the tubing down every year? No, you don't have to take it down. We put this tubing up. It's now been up about 6 years. It'll be up here 8 to 10 years before we need to replace it. So it's up in the woods. Deer don't hurt it. We have elk in here. Elk don't hurt it. Coyotes will chew on it. My big enemy are squirrels. They like to gnaw on things, and they'll put little holes in it. But we go through it each fall when we're getting ready to prep the lines for the season and make any repairs that we can. But even if a tree falls on it, it'll stretch to the ground, and you cut the tree or cut the line and put it back together. It's a 5-minute repair.
That makes it really nice. This is what I hope to go to by next syrup season. This is my plans, is to maybe not have 300 trees tapped, but it would be nice to have at least 100 trees tapped.
You know, we're right. If we can do anything to help you get there, you know, we've learned a lot the hard way by trial and error. If we can help other people figure it out, we'd love to see you out there producing too. So
well,
wish you all the best.
We sure appreciate it, and it's folks like you who helps the guys who know absolutely nothing about it learn this process. And you know, it's like we said in the beginning of the video, this is a self-reliance skill. This is something, you know, once you learn it, no one can take that away from you. So
and think about this too, self-reliance. Sugar. Where do you get sugar if things go bad?
Exactly.
If it's, you know, during World War II, it was rationed. It was hard to get. It was expensive. We can make our own sugar.
Exactly.
Right here.
Exactly.
And you can take all the water out of maple syrup and end up with brown sugar, and it's so good.
Oh yes.
So it is a real good tool to be self-reliant.